Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on me. I'm yourself. You guys keep clicking. If you guys keep clicking, I'll keep making. And we're back in another video. I'm so excited to talk about, is Survivor 41, does it have any shot of even competing with these top tier seasons? Is it the best season ever? Could it be the best season ever? Will it ever have a chance of being the best season ever? We're going to get into all of it, but first, our Power Rankings podcast that we're dropping tomorrow, probably midday, somewhere around noonish, maybe 2 o'clock, something like that. We have a special guest, which I'm going to tell you guys at the end of the video who this special guest is. I'm pretty hype. I just okay, let's get into the video. But first, 72% of you guys who watch these videos are not subscribed. Let's change that. It's easy and it's free. And if that's so, let's get right into the video. Okay, so last time that we made, the last time we made this argument for the other side, we had talked about, how could it possibly be the worst season ever, or how far is it from being that, or what does it have to do to be that? And so I want to make the argument the other way around. Obviously, to clarify, I don't really agree with either of these arguments. I don't think it's the best season ever. I don't think it's the worst season ever. It's obviously somewhere far in between. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to talk about the positives for this video, whereas in the worst video was more about the negatives of this season so far. And so, yeah, let's get into it. So I really want to get deep into what makes a good season good. For me personally, as someone who has watched 39 seasons, yes, I have not watched Thailand. Please don't judge me. I'm not watching Thailand. But as someone who has seen 39 seasons, I feel like overall, the first thing that a season has to have to be in that top tier, and by top tier, I mean the Kagians, David vs. Goliaths, heroes versus villains, Micronesia, Pearl Islands, China, like levels are A, B, and C characters. And by that, I mean like A tier, B tier, and C tier characters. So for reference, an A tier character, or an S tier for that matter, is somebody who is such a good character that they can almost carry a season on their own. Now, would that season probably be bad? Yeah, but they could genuinely carry a season all on their own. They're very big personality. We hear from them several times an episode, and they at least have a few big episodes where they get tons of confessionals. And usually these people get at least to the final 8, I'd say, something like that. And so I feel like for me personally, you need at least 2 A tier characters. 3 is probably the golden number there. And Kagehan's is the perfect example, where really you have an S tier in Tony, and then you have 2 A tiers. And so that's that perfect number of like 3 A plus tiers, like either an A or an S tier, like character in Cass, Spencer, and Tony. I feel like that's that sweet spot where you have like 3 people above or at a tier character. Then a B tier character is kind of, they're not necessarily like just characters here, like who are they? But they're also not your A tier level characters. We care about them and we actually are invested in them, but not as much as the A tier characters. They help out in the story by progressing the story along. They actually make like the decisions that in the game that are just as important as the ones that that the A tier characters make. The only difference is that the A tier characters are just bigger personalities and bigger characters, or just better players. But the B tier characters do just as much. They just don't get as much recognition because they're just not as good TV, period. And then the C tier characters are very supportive. They support the B, the A, and the S tier characters by allowing them to flourish, by just kind of being pieces on their chessboard. They're decent characters. Hopefully they're no duds. But if you're a C tier character, you are there as a piece on somebody else's board. Their board being a story, the story of the season. You are more of a pawn than a queen or a king. The next thing that I feel like is just about almost always happening on these top tier seasons is clear sides. So seasons like Game Changers and Winners at War kind of flopped, especially in the post-merge, because of the fact that there wasn't very like clear, like, okay, there's this side and there's that side. Like there's not seasons that are like top tier that don't have, like, for example, right, I'll work through all like the seasons that you could argue are top tier. So let's start with Pearl Islands. You have the 2 sides, Drake and Morgan. Like there's obviously flipping, but the 2 starting and like the 2 sides that in the end are like the 2 most important sides / factions in the game are Drake and Morgan, period. Then the next big one I'd say is probably China. You have Fei Long and John Hu, the 2 defined sides. And then after that, in Micronesia, the two sides seem to be the women and the men in the post merge, with the Black Widow alliance and then everybody else. Plus, I guess Eliza. It's kind of out in her own island in that scenario. And then I guess the next one will be heroes versus villains. The heroes and the villains, one side, one side. Kagiyan, you have Tony's alliance and you have the other alliance, and then Tony kind of flips back and forth. But there's two alliances, and Cass and Tony. Cass flips once, and Tony flips like 8 times, and so it's two clear sides. And then the last example is David versus Goliath, where you have the Davids and the Goliaths. All of these seasons have clear sides. You have clear, okay, there's this side and there's this side, and that side is going against this side. They're having war. Now, there's obviously bad versions of this, like Omatepe and Zapatera, where one side just wins out at the merge and they just don't let off the gas. Good seasons, the losing tribe then comes back and flips, and then it flips back, and then it flips back again. That doesn't necessarily mean that a good season has to have flips every other second. What it does mean is that a good season includes fluid gameplay. And speaking of fluid gameplay, I said flips/fluid gameplay for this next one. If there's a pagonging, your season is not good. Name one season that has a straight up pagonging that is even in the top 25. There's none. If you want to say, oh, well, technically HVV was a pagonging except for Danielle, it's like, no, it wasn't, because Danielle is not part of the hero strap. So technically, there was one flip. And so what I'm saying is you need to have multiple flips to be in that top 3, top 5 range. And that's honestly why HVV isn't there for me, is because of the fact that there's only one flip there in the entirety of the merge after the big merge vote. And so I feel like a flip is a flip and or several flips are very, very necessary, because you need that fluid gameplay while still having 2, maybe 3 just defined sides, because that's how you create a season that's digestible as a viewer to understand and analyze. If your season's just so hard to understand that you just don't get anything, then it's not very fun to watch, because you're so confused and the sides aren't defined, and it's kind of hard to say, well, I'm rooting for this side. Whereas at the same time, if the lines are just drawn so hard that it's just like Omatepe and Zapatera, where it's just like a straight up pagonging the entire time, that's not fun to watch either. And lastly, I have heroes, villains, but most importantly, complex, multi-dimensional people. And so when I say multi-dimensional, I mean people who show both their weaknesses, their strengths, both their heroic traits, and their, villain. Is there an adjective that has villain? You guys can tell me in the comments to make me look like an idiot, but I'm going to keep going. Heroic and just villain type of traits. Things like that, to me personally, are super, super important, because if you have a person who's just JT, that can do no wrong, at least in token chains, your JT character who's just a perfect, awesome, perfect pro player, and then you have someone someone who's just super on like Bradley and goes down. You just generally dislike the person, period, or like a Scott, those are good. Both those are good people to have on your season. For an example, in a season like Kagiyan, right, you have your Spencer, your hero the whole time, right? Or I don't, is that yeah, let's go with Spencer, and then you have Cass, your villain. But then you have multi-dimensional people like Tony, like LJ, I'm trying to think, people like that who are not necessarily villain type of people, because they have multi sides to them as characters and also as people. Everybody has multiple sides to them as people. Cass isn't always a villain. Spencer isn't always a hero. But I'm not looking for people who have multiple sides to them. I'm looking for characters that do. And usually when you have multiple sides as a character, you also have multiple sides as a person as well. And so I think the casting did great on this season doing that, as we'll discuss later. But I feel like to have heroes on your season, like in David vs. Goliath, to have someone like a Christian as a hero, and then someone like a Natalie Cole as a villain, and then you have all of these multi-dimensional people like an Allison and an Alec and a John and a Dan and Davey, all these people that have done heroic stuff and have done villain type of things, but aren't necessarily either, because they're very complex characters. And lastly, a satisfying winner. If your winner is not satisfying, you don't have a good season. And I'm not talking about the person who you rooted for winning. I'm talking about the person who you're not saying, oh my God, if they win, I'm going to quit watching the show. That's who you don't want to win. It's not necessarily, like, oh, I want Aubrey to win. Well, at least, freaking Julia didn't win and go wrong. It's like, like, yes, maybe you didn't want, for example, maybe you didn't want Ty, not Ty. Maybe you didn't want Yule to win over Ozzy and Kirk Islands, but at least, freaking Becky didn't win, or like, Sandra didn't win. It's about having people who you genuinely feel okay with them winning, or genuinely like winning, or like feel fulfilled with them winning the season. Because if someone who you just feel like you're just like, what, this was all for nothing. If they win, no matter how good a season is, you come out with a bad taste in your mouth, and that's never good for a season's viewing experience. So let's compare that to 41. So let's now go through the list for 41 and talk about if 41 has those. So the first thing is, who are the A, B, and C characters in 41, and do they have them? So I think that they do. Right now, I would say your A characters are Xander, Evie, and Xander, Evie. I'm going to go with Deshawn. Xander, Evie, Deshawn, and you could argue Liana's in there right now. Shan's kind of fallen off, but it could also be Shan there. I'm going to go, okay, let me narrow it down to 3 here. So if I have to pick, if it has to be 3, I'm going to go with Evie, Deshawn, Liana. That's my 3 who I feel like if I had to pick the A tier characters right now. But that was hard. So that is sort of a pitfall of the season, is that you really don't have a lot of A tier characters. Now, a season that doesn't need a lot of A tier characters, because a season like David vs. Goliath has like 1 A tier in Christian, and then everybody else is just a really, really good B tier character, which works, and so that works. But I'm a little concerned just because there isn't anyone who's really popping off the screen right now. Like, this person is like your easy, A tier, S tier character, but that's okay for the time being. Who are your B tier characters on this season? I'm looking at Nasir. I'm looking at Danny. I'm looking at Shan right now, because she's not really getting an edit, but I'm sure Shan will come back. I'm looking at Xander, because I didn't put him in the final cut for the A tier characters. And then who are your C tier characters? I'm gonna go with Tiffany. I'm gonna go with your Erica's, because she got no edit in the pre-merge. I'm gonna go with your Ricards. I'm gonna go with Sydney wasn't a C tier. I don't know, but again, this category I'm kind of struggling to figure out whether or not they have it. So I'm gonna say they kind of check off the box with this one, but I don't necessarily know if I'm so confident in their ability to produce A and C tier characters. I think they have a bunch of really good Bs, but they need to start like pumping up the edit on one of the A tiers or one of the C tiers, or else you're going to just have a bunch of B tiers, which works, but it has to be perfect. Okay, what are the 2 defined sides so far? So right now, the 2 defined sides would be the Yase 3 versus everybody else. It's okay to have a small defined side. If you look at a season like China, where the small defined side, even when they get Pagong, because the big side like got developed early on, like the Fei Longs got developed, and Todd got developed, Manny got developed, James got developed, Jean Robert and Denise got developed early on, so that we generally cared about them and actually wanted the majority alliance to pick off the John who's at the merge. And so it's okay to have a small minority, especially nowadays when there's so much flipping back and forth, flip, this and that. And so I feel like I guarantee you that it's not just going to be a boom, boom, boom. There you go, Tiffany, and then Evie, and then Xander going off in that order. Like, it's just not that easy. Okay, let's talk about the next one. And by the way, for the last one, I'm going to say definitely a check for that one. So we have 2 checks so far. Now the next one, I'm going to talk about flipping / fluid gameplay. Definitely some fluid gameplay. We saw Deshawn and Danny flip on their alliance member just now, like right there, like that. Very fluid gameplay. I like that. And also, it was kind of defined because we earlier in the episode, we saw how Deshawn was, saying, well, if it, worst comes to worst, let's just, vote out Sydney. Like every time he got nervous, he's like, well, we could just vote out Sydney. Like, come on, let's make it easier. And so it got developed early on, so that we knew why Sydney just kind of got picked, out of everybody else to be the person who kind of caught like that ricochet bullet. as well as other, Shan flipping back and forth, well, not back and forth, but Shan kind of cutthroat, blindsiding both Brad and JD, and so to me, it seems like those are two really big blindsides, and even the people who weren't necessarily the most entertaining boots still like had no idea that they were going home. And Abraham, Sarah, and Boche, and so it seems to me like you have very fluid gameplay, and so I do think that that's also a check for this one as well. The next one is who okay, let's look at the characters. Who is our heroes right now? I'd say our heroes easily Xander, and I'd say you could argue. I don't know if Liana's I think Liana actually might be a villain right now. I'm gonna go with Xander as our main hero right now, and probably Evie as well. But Evie could just be like a product of being with Xander. So let's go with just Xander for now. Who are our villains? I'll go with Ricard. I'll go with Liana right now. So those are our two villains right now. I'd say those are our two right now. I would say Shan. She's probably been more negative, but Shan's got such a positive edit in the pre-merge. Like I don't know why they gave that to her and then are just like pooping on her right now in the edit. So I'm sure something's coming with Shan, either a big blindside or a big switch in edit. And then just about everybody, else is a very multi-dimensional character. I mean, we have people like Nasir, right? Who like you think they're just like a dude who's just throwing out everybody's name, but then he turns into like a generally like nice guy, with a really good story. If you look at Deshaun, someone who's done villainous acts, who has flipped on his alliance members several times, has said negative things, but then they show him in a very positive light. Saying we need to adapt to new game, this and that. And they like show his perspective there, so he's not completely just like, he's the villain all day long. Oh, and also to mention earlier, I do think that Sydney was probably our person that was our other villain besides Ricard and Liana right now, if she would have stayed. And the last one, is there a satisfying winner? We have no idea because we don't know the winner. So I'm going to go with who would be acceptable to beat a satisfying winner. So who I feel like so okay, who would like if they won? I'd be like, okay, that's okay. So I'll start listing them off: Chantel, Xander, Deshaun, Danny. Who else? I would say Sean, Danny. I would go probably on top of that with Liana. I would probably go on top of that again with Evie. And so like those, I feel like those people, like if they won, I'd be like, okay, at least I know why they won. I'm not like heartbroken over them winning. Here are some people who, if they win, this season's ruined. Liana, or no, sorry, not Liana. Tiffany, Heather, Erica, people like that who we just like either got no edit from in the pre-merge, or we just generally like are told like she is not a good player, or like so I feel like for me Tiffany falls into that category where we were shown like how frantic she was and how like just like kind of like over the top, and like just like I feel like as a viewer when you watch episode 2 you can't help but just say calm down, bro. And so she's shown as like a non-factor character, and I know everyone's so high on her right now because of like all that Edgic reading things or whatever, but I'm using the eyeball tests, and I'll take that over your Edgic whatever things, because I look at Tiffany and I don't see a winner of Survivor. If you do, that's your your opinion there, but I just don't see that at all. Oh, and I also forgot to mention that Nasir would be considered an acceptable pick here. Next, I just want to do a little quick spiel on what I call the Erica effect. So I feel like what we could have right now is a sense of that there could be this feeling of no matter how good that this post-merge gets, because of the whole Erica smash the hourglass twist and that whole like episode and a half that was ruined. And by episode and a half, I mean like the whole last episode, and then like the first 20 minutes of this episode were just kind of like ruined because the twist was so bad. And so I feel like for me, because that entire episode and a half span where the show was just like terrible, for me at least, that's gonna ruin my view on the season, because when I go back to rewatch it, like that's literally them, like it's similar to how like an IOI, no matter how good like that Jack and Jason like stretches where they both get blindsided, or like Missy and Aaron going crazy in the post merge, or like Dean and and Tommy like with the idol hunt. It's all super cool, but the whole point is that you're all you can do is think about, hey, this big moment, at the merge with Dan is coming up. Oh no. It's like you can never get your mind off it. I feel like that may be how we look back on the season and say, well, it was so good, but that twist just ruined, like, it put a terrible taste in everybody's mouth. And so now it's like, how can we enjoy the season? Because we just felt like the whole season was kind of just ruined from the start of the merge, from this very lackluster twist. And so for me personally, I think it might come down to the fact that we'll just look at this twist as like a season ruiner almost. Next, I just want to touch on the floor and ceiling for how high or how low this season could be ranked among the other seasons. And obviously, number 1 being the best season, number 40 being the worst. I feel like the floor for this season right now, if things go wrong, like I think they could go wrong, I'm going to go with the 27th. I think at worst, the season ends up at like 27th on the rankings, meaning like there are 26 seasons that are better than it at worst. I think at best, we could be looking at a top 8, so I have 8th for my ceiling. I feel like if it went bad, it would probably be because we had like either like a very boring post-merge where they just dominate the Yase 3 and it's just like kind of an easy domination, or like unlikable people, people get to the end and then it's a very unlikable winner, or like a really, really bad twist at the end that like ruins the whole game and is super unfair, like a forced fire making type of deal. I feel like that's how we could get our floor at 27. Or our ceiling at 8. I feel like what we could get is from here on, this 3, goes back and forth. And again, what I don't want is this 3 just like running the whole game. I want them to go out, but I want them to go out in interesting ways. And I want some, like one of them to stay or 2 of them to stay. Like I want the 2 sides of the season, being the 8 and the 3, to trade jabs with each other. Blindside, on your side, and then blindside, in the 3, and then it's blindside back and forth. Advantage this, advantage that. I like that. Obviously, you don't want to focus all on advantages, but I do like when the advantages like are used in ways that are able to develop the characters and to move the story along in satisfying ways. And so I feel like overall, if this season can use that to its advantage, I generally think that it's in a great spot. My guess, like right now, what I'm guessing it's going to end up as in the end, after everything, after the winners announced, after all of like the postseason tell-alls, is 14th place. I feel like at best, not at best. My guess is 14th place. I think it'll end up doing what I just said, but I do think it'll lack it. Like we'll have a few episodes where it'll just be kind of boring and or like focused on the wrong things, and we'll probably have one more pretty shitty twist, and that could end up hurting the season as well. But I do think that the characters will bring it at least above a 20, hopefully at least. And then from there, I think it'll probably notch up like 6 spots just based on a few more big blind sides. And so my guess was like 13 or 14, and I went with 14. Just looking at all of the seasons and kind of just giving like an eyeball test. So what is your prediction for how you think this season's going to end up in the end? Do y'all thinking like 15th place, 16th, 17th, 30th, 40th, 1st, 5th? What is the placement at the end of the day after everything is settled that you think this season is going to get, and why? Tell me down in the comments, and if it isn't absolutely outrageous, maybe I'll like it. Now for the big news. Tomorrow, I will have a good friend, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing this, but Ethan Amale, that's who I'm having on the podcast tomorrow. If you haven't gone and checked him out, he's in the description right now. His channel has, I think, 25,000. I haven't checked in a while, but he's doing great over there, and so he's going to pop on the podcast. We're going to talk. Me and Ethan go way back, we go way back. No, but again, Ethan's always nice, and so I decided to have him on the podcast where we're going to talk about power rankings. We're going to talk about all the fun that we've been having going up and down this season. We're you're going to get his opinion on the season, as he's not really posting much 41 content. And yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Ethan, hi, what's up? I like Ethan too. I think we all like Ethan, and so let's like Ethan tomorrow while watching the video. So that video should be out around 12 to maybe 3, 1. I don't know, whatever I choose, because I'm the boss. As always, guys, like, sub, comment, do all that good stuff, guys. None of this happens without you guys. None of this. I'm just some weird guy talking into a mic without you guys. Hit the subscribe button, notification bell, but most importantly, and then after that, hit all, because you can get every single notification when I post my posts on this, whatever this is. It's a YouTube channel. There it is. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.